this would be a great opportunity to just look at some different artists and the way they have chosen to simplify what could be an incredibly complex subject. So I'm going to start out with my good friend Jill Carver. And this obviously could be a highly complex subject, but she has chosen to simplify it by number one. I mean, this sounds easy, like kind of a pat answer, which it is certainly not. Let me get my little stylus deal up here. I know I'm always fiddling with these things. And Jill has simply chosen to see big. And by that, I mean, it helps if you squint down at your subject. It also helps if you work out beforehand, as in a thumbnail, right there on the spot. What are the big shapes? What are the most important shapes? And how much attention am I going to give to the details in there? And so Jill has determined that obviously the fall trees along the shore of this creek or river are very important as a lead-in to these wonderful big shapes back here in the background. These that are cooler than what's in the foreground. So in order to do that, this takes a rather brave move on your part. And by brave, I mean simply choosing a large brush and not allowing yourself to slide over into your little brushes, your number 2s and number 1s, and keeping a full palette. I mean, in other words, by that I mean a lot of paint out there on your palette, so you're not constantly mixing, remixing. And Jill will invariably use a restricted palette, a limited palette, and it changes from one piece to another. And this is, again, another great example. You saw some of her marvelous work in the previous deliverable. So that's one way to do it, is simply use a larger brush. And I know I don't want to get redundant here, but I know it sounds simple, but believe me, mentally, it's hard. It's hard to force yourself to do that. But it's a tremendous exercise, whether you're working in the studio or you're working outdoors, you're working still life, landscape, figure, it doesn't matter. Pick up those bigger tools and see what a difference it can make, because it forces you to simplify. And so this is one way to do it. Here I'm going to show you another acquaintance of mine, a lady that is just a superb painter, Nancy Switzer. And simplicity, obviously, in choice of subject. That's a biggie right there, is how complicated do I want to make my subject. And she does these incredible paintings of everyday objects. I would love to do a deliverable in nothing but Nancy's paintings, but I just pulled these two out. She's having a two-person show at the moment. It's at Claggett Ray Gallery in over in Eagle or over by Vale. Anyway, you can look up claggettray.com. And you can see a selection of her work. Some of these, this one is a smaller piece. I think it's like a 12 by 12, and you can see not only the simplicity of attainable by using a large brush, but the amount of paint she uses is incredible. I mean, I swear she's got to buy this stuff by the gallon, and this, like I said, this is probably like a 12 by 12. But she paints. She has paintings in her current show that's hanging at the gallery. One of them is a 5 by 10 foot painting of stacks of bowls or tin cans. That's what it is. Wall to wall, top to bottom, tin cans with dramatic light on them. It just rocks your world to see these things. They're amazing and they're luscious and they're just an exciting, very stimulating image to stand in front of. So this is one way. Nancy's approach. Again, this is one of her smaller pieces that's in the show. I just pulled these offline, and but she has this wonderful whimsical nature with her work, but is deadly serious about it, and very, very bright, a brilliant painter and a brilliant thinker. She likes to put a little twist on things. It's you have to see the work to really appreciate it and admire the ingenuity in her vision. And here we see this is a great example. Simple household, well, bar room. These are shot glasses, and but she doesn't shy away from the old adage of, well, you have to have an odd number. No, she'll work in even numbers and make it work. And there'll be subtle little differences within each object. You'll just little things, whether it's a little note of the real cool light over here, the cool light here, another variation on it here, and just the handling of each image of each object, we'll say, but with no fussy detail whatsoever. Now we'll look at a couple Russian paintings by a gentleman by the name of Tim Coff. He died back in the 60s, I think, 60s or 70s. And again, obviously wintertime, that simplifies your whole subject right there. There's snow on the ground, which makes it so much fun to paint if you want to stand out in the middle of it. And here's a guy, he's one of a classic Russian painter, a contemporary painter. And he paint outside. Just amazing, because these are large paintings. You can see here, this is a 20 by 31 and a half. Oh, painted in 75. So he probably lived a little bit longer than I gave him credit for. But a powerful colorist. And once again, a lot of paint and big tools, big brushes. You don't see any sign of any little fussy brushwork in here, other than right those final touches right there, those final little accents on those trees. But you see how he treats these bare trees as one mass. This is what I've talked about with some of you about how you go about indicating a bare tree like this without getting into all that fussy detail. Well, you simply take the average color when you squint down of the foliage itself, the limbs themselves, and mix it with a little bit of that sky color and get the value right and just put a stroke down. And gosh darn if it doesn't read like a bare, like a winter tree, doesn't it? This is just such a classic example, classic Russian painter. And another, boy, I mean, a real functional way of keeping it simple. Let's look at this other Tim Coff here, and this is obviously a summer piece. I think the title of it was After the Rain. And I apologize, the color in these, in the originals, is really quite, they're quite brilliant. He was, like I said before, he was a brilliant colorist, and but you see how he chose this real high key sunstruck. The sun has just come out on this after a rain, which keeps the color back in here rich and just real luscious back in here. And this real high key street, whether it's the architecture or the street itself, he's chosen to keep that basically one value, isn't it? With a few dark accents. He doesn't need any more than that. Look at this simple figure back here. Just boom, just like two strokes of paint with a big fat brush, big loaded brush. And darn if it doesn't read. And you see these subtle shifts in temperature. And I mean, you say, well, there's some value shift in there too, maybe a half a value. I mean, this is just masterful use of warm and cool and those delicate value changes. This is the street itself is a higher key we see here, and then the side street is a little bit warmer. That's all the more description you need. This is really a direction to strive for. I'm not saying that this is the only way to do it, but look at the little subtle indication of detail up here, all with a big brush. With the corner of a loaded brush, he can make this read. That's all it is. He never allowed himself to drop down to a little fussy brush. So now we'll look at. And I apologize. The image I shot this through glass. Again, this was my friend's house who has the Greg Packard hanging, and this is Edith Emerson. She was a group of women painters back at the turn of the century, early 1900s. Most of them had studied with Arthur Wesley Dow, who's written a book on composition, was a well-known painter and thinker and teacher of composition, color composition, spatial composition, and stylization, simplification. And this was a trip that Edith took with a friend of hers to Italy, and she painted mostly in gouache and watercolor with body color added, which simply means body color is adding white to your watercolor. You can do the same thing by using gouache and treating gouache as watercolor, thin it out with washes, and then let it start drifting over to the more opaque nature of it. But you can see, squint down, and this thing tells the whole story right there, and you see how simply she has chosen to eliminate detail in favor of shapes, big shapes, and big shapes against more delicate shapes of this foreground in shadow of these cypress trees back here, of the tree foliage on the side of the hill, and again, it just reads like a shot. There's no doubt in your mind the location, the feel of the day, what's going on. She's been true to the subject, to her subject matter, and yet she's been very true to herself and her beliefs, and that is one of simplification and composition, and these real delicate value patterns. Now we'll go to the last. We'll go look at this last painter. I saved one of the very best for last, and this is Antonio Mancini. And Mancini was obviously, you can tell by his name, an Italian painter, and he was considered by Sorolla, by Anders Zorn, and by John Sargent to be the best painter in the world at the time. They all collected his work. They looked up to him. He had some mental issues, but you could say, well, who among us doesn't? But he was kind of in and out of hospitals several times in his life. But when you squint down at this piece, and you can see it's a cliffside with foliage, with trees, and the man's work is mesmerizing. You can look him up online and see examples of his work. He does figurative pieces, so his landscape pieces. He just was one of those painters, when you stand in front of his work, it just melts your heart. And what he's done is not so much with large brushes, but I'll see if I can get into some of this. it's with the brushwork itself, and not allowing himself to be sucked into the details. He's painting texture. He's painting visual texture, and this is a real, I want to say, high level of seeing and painting. It's a difficult thing to do, because we're always wrestling with our human nature and wanting to say, well, I need to explain that a little further, and not trusting your judgment. And no, you don't. Run with it. Run with it. I mean, the greatest descriptive line in this is this top edge up here of the trees against the sky. Okay, he's working with a very limited palette, you can see, but that is the only line that carries. I mean, this is the thing that carries the entire painting. It establishes, it's the anchor for this piece. And now we'll look at it from here. It's not a super large piece either. I think it's about, I mean, don't take it to the bank, but I think it's about 15 inches tall and about maybe 11 inches wide. And I'm guessing it's probably painted on a panel. Looks kind of like it was. So I hope with this little survey of a kind of a cross section of different approaches to simplification, it helps you see better, see more, and understand what it takes to simplify a subject, so that you get a stronger statement, a more powerful image. That's what we do. The simpler you can keep those shapes, the more power that image will have. And the more you break down those shapes into smaller parts, you're just sucking the power out of that statement. So keep that in mind. Detail can be deadly. Unless, of course, you're a photorealist. In that case, then you can forget everything I've just said in here. So, I do hope you find this was exciting and worthwhile, and generate some questions that we can talk about within the group. I'd love to do that. So thank you guys for bearing with me, and let me know what you think.
Hi, I'm Skip Whitcomb. I'll be conducting a mentoring course on color harmony. In over 40 years of teaching, color seems to be one of the biggest mysteries. We'll be able to spend a year together developing a reliable foundation for making harmonious color decisions. There are certain irrefutable truisms in painting. One is the fewer colors used, the stronger and more harmonious the statement. Economy of color equals clarity of intention. Respected painters, past and present, understood this concept and have employed it in one form or another. We will explore the power of a limited palette, calculating progressive sequences of 3 to 6 colors, referred to as harmonic chords, and explore how to select the best color set to serve our concept. The goal is to give each artist a reliable foundation for making color decisions, for developing personal expressions of color. Hope to see you in the course.